One of the great finds during the first dig, after Richard III was discovered, was the uncovering of this intact stone coffin. It's the first intact medieval stone coffin that's been excavated in Leicester during a modern excavation. It was unfortunate we found it at the very end of the excavation. We just ran out of time to look at it closer, so we had to cover it back up and leave it in situ. And you wouldn't believe how frustrating it is to have to cover something as great as that up and without knowing what's inside it.
So in 2013, the big plan was then to take off the lid of this stone sarcophagus and then to see what the contents were inside it.
And there's another crack on this side down here, so I think it might actually be the coffin bit itself.
The whole stone sarcophagus wasn't lifted in one piece, partly because it was going to be too heavy and you'd have to get a crane in, which would have to reach right across the site.
And as we sort of carefully cleaned off the top and down the sides, it was fairly obvious that the weight of the lid of the coffin had started to crack the stonework, and we didn't think it would lift intact if we went down the route of trying to lift the whole thing. So we decided we'd lift the lid first. We did think maybe we needed to get some lifting apparatus in to lift it, but the site was so uneven, it's an archaeological excavation, that there was no way we were going to be able to bring something in without creating some very elaborate sort of scaffolding for it to sit on. So in the end we went with the old school method, and we lifted up one end of the lid and managed to slide lifting straps underneath it, and then 9 of us lifted the lid off and moved it across the site. Inside then we found a more or less intact lead coffin, so it's a stone sarcophagus with an inner lead casket. So now we were faced with the situation of trying to extract the lead casket from out of the coffin. But the stone coffin was really badly cracked, although it was in situ in the ground. The weight of the lid had completely fractured the stonework. So in the end we were able to carefully dismantle one side of the stone coffin using the existing crack lines, so that we could slide a wooden plank underneath the lead coffin and just lift the wooden plank, so the wooden plank took the weight. And in the end it was quite a smooth and easy operation, and it only took 2 of us to lift the lead coffin out of the stone coffin.
And we had it transported to Leicester Royal Infirmary initially because there was a slight chance that the lead inner coffin had actually caused some organic preservation of the remains within it. But as it turned out, after an examination with an endoscope, it was clear that the person in this coffin had become skeletonized, so the normal processes of decay had taken place.
There's fabric and hair. Is this hair here? There. It's not hair. Yeah.
So opening up a lead coffin was an interesting challenge. It's not something I've ever had to do before in my career. But lead is very soft, and in the end we decided what we'd do, rather than try and break the solder of the seals of the coffin, because that could sort of destroy important archaeological information, was that we'd cut a line around the base of the coffin, lift the lid and sides off it, and leave the base as a tray with the skeletal material on. And it is a little like opening a tin can. It is just a simple case of getting a knife in and cutting the lead, and it cuts really smoothly.
Blocks the cutting blade. That's working.
Once we'd cut the lid and sides off and lifted them off, what we had was basically the skeleton laid out on the lead base of the casket. There was a few little fragments of linen or some sort of cloth material surviving at the base of the grave. A little bit of cord still survived, and these might be the remains of the shroud. And a little bit of hair survived as well. But that was it. Otherwise, it was just the skeleton. That cord down there is binding the shroud. It might be. Right. So, a grave like this, very elaborate, stone sarcophagus, lead in a casket, buried in a very prominent position in the church close to the high altar. You've got to think this person was important to the friars. And we do know the names of a few other people connected with the friary. We have the names of a couple of Franciscan provincial ministers buried at Leicester, for instance. So could it be someone like that? But no, it can't, because it's a woman. So that rules out any men connected with the friary. But we do have the names of a few women associated with the friary. We have 7 altogether. We know this woman was over 60 when she died. Stable isotope analysis of her bones suggests that she had a very high status diet, that she was eating a lot of fish and meat, and in fact when you compare her diet with Richard III's, it's only just below his adult diet. And radiocarbon dating tells us that she died either in the sort of the latter half of the 13th century or in the 14th century, so about 100 years at least before Richard III. So we can take all this and apply it to that list of names. And for a start, we can rule 3 of them out because they all died in the 16th century, so they're too late to be this skeleton. Of the four remaining, the big one is Eleanor Countess of Leicester. We know she was a patron of the friary. But unfortunately, she died in France and was buried in France, as far as we know, so it's unlikely to be her. Of the other three, there's only one that we know for certain that is definitely buried in our friary church. Her name's Emma Holt. She's probably from Neville Holt in Leicestershire. But that's about all we know about her. We know she was buried around about 1290 in the friary church, and that's it. We don't know her age at death. We don't know what she did for a living. We don't know what she looked like. We don't have any descendants from her. So despite having a known woman buried here and a skeleton with a set of attributes, we can't link the two together. And unfortunately, this skeleton will always remain anonymous.